Going live. Perfect. Okay, I think we're live. Hello and welcome to the Edinburgh Entrepreneurs Society's first online event of September. With me, I've got Dominic Matcham. He is the founder and managing director of Invades. They're a sporting events, basically marketing and agency. They create loads of different events throughout the UK. Loads of university students get involved. I've personally been to a horse racing event in Edinburgh. It's great fun. So I'm going to pass it over to Dom. Dom, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. So thanks ever so much for having me, Harrison. Edinburgh has been a really successful city for us, really, with Invades. But yeah, it's great to be on this show. Do we call it a show? I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose
that's the right thing. So yeah, I thought I'd give you guys really a bit of background on how I started Invades and how I've really followed my passion for sport and starting and growing a business. Talk really a bit about our journey to date. So, where we came from when I was at university and, our first events we did to where it is now. And I think where we're strategically heading as business. And then I also wanted to give you guys a little bit of background on my career so far. So I've had experience working in finance for a tier one bank. I've also had experience working at a creative agency who, work with clients like Nike, Apple, that sort of stuff, those sort of clients. And really what I've learned from those experiences. And I think if anything, I'd love to inspire people leaving university to consider an alternative career path, and, people with an idea and with drive and passion really, I feel should be putting that into their own ventures. But I think the way which society and university life is set up is we're all sort of driven to go and work for these big banks. We're all driven to go and work for these big consultancy firms. So yeah, hopefully with anyone, thinking of that as their next step really in their career, I can hopefully show you a potential different route. So yeah, I just thought I'd pull together a short presentation. You should. Harrison, can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, as Harrison sort of alluded to really at the start, Invades is I essentially think we're a social media and experiences company. I think what for us, we've seen obviously in the past sort of 10 years, social media has become, the be all and end all really. And I think the most successful companies are building communities online, and social media allows us to do that. So what that's created, and there's been a huge drive, certainly in sport, of digital media, and what effect has that had on physical audiences, because it's so much easier now to access live sport than it ever was before. So what we see really as an opportunity is how can we use social media to build these communities, and then bring these communities together for real life experiences. And I think that feeds back. It's sort of like a cycle, which a self-fulfilling cycle, in the sense that, if we can give people these Instagrammable experiences and days out, it actually fuels more customers. So we're using what we always try and do at Invades is how can we turn our customer into a billboard really, and give them an amazing experience that they want to share, which obviously is shared on social media, which then drives more sales. So that's something which we've been really passionate about. And I think we've been quite successful in a relatively short period at doing. And I think that's also led us on to working with some of these big sporting organisations, such as the Jockey Club, such as Ascot, is what we're doing with social media is far more innovative compared to what they're doing. And what we're doing is attracting the next generation really of fan and next generation of customer. So we've sort of over lockdown really developed a business helping them use social media more innovatively, and that's sort of developed our social media agency model beyond where it was. So yeah, I thought I'd give you a little brief history really of of how Invades started, just because it sort of shows that how the idea is built up, and if you follow your passions, and one opportunity really leads to another. So yeah, I started off at Loughborough. I went to Loughborough University, which is really great uni, but it's fairly isolated from other universities. I think Edinburgh's got fantastic nightlife, great venues, get lots of acts, whereas Loughborough, small university in a relatively small Midland town, but close to Nottingham, close to Birmingham, close to Leicester. So the first event really was about how can we create an event bringing multiple universities together, giving opportunity for students to really meet other people. So we started off doing nightclub nights, and I think I fairly quickly realised that I didn't enjoy working with nightclub owners and promoters particularly, and I found it that it was a very saturated market. And in my final year, we went to Nottingham races, and I sort of organised it for me and all my friends, and I know about 40 of us went, had an amazing day, and I sort of twigged that actually no one really in the country was doing this, and it was something which, horse racing is as a sport which traditionally has struggled really to connect really with the next generation. We sort of moved from nightclub events to our first horse racing event, which was in June 2019, and we did a test event at Nottingham. So we had Loughborough and Nottingham. So it was two universities. We sold the first one out within, I think it was a week. We sold 1,500 tickets, and I think at that point I realised that there was something in it. Obviously, Nottingham is part of the Jockey Club, who are a major UK brand, and got, I think, 15 race courses. So we quickly moved the conversation to, well, if we can do this in Nottingham, how can we do this at other universities, other race courses? That's really how we started in racing. So that was in June 2019. We then moved on then we obviously scaled up and did 63 universities to 14 race courses, and sold 20,000 tickets, and that was last freshers. And then from that, we sort of did, we added darts in spring 2020, just before coronavirus hit. And then coronavirus came along, and obviously very much shut the business, the event side of the business down. So this was sort of, how can we start to engage with our almost suppliers, so people who were previously bringing lots of students and physical audiences to, how can we work with these guys to make their social media a bit more interesting? So that's sort of how the media developed. And then I think we're currently at this space of going forward. Invades is really has three primary revenue streams. So two primary revenue streams, and then Invades Change, which is something which we're currently working on. This was an example which was in July 2020. So the Jockey Club obviously have got the Epsom Derby, which is one of the biggest flat races in the country, really. And they were looking at ways in which they could engage their at-home audience. So we came up with this Derby Day Live campaign, which really was about pushing racing through Instagram into new audiences. So this was broadcast on the Jockey Club's main channel, and we went live with a celebrity, and it was hosted by BBC Radio 1's Chris Stark. So that was a sort of the format which we used. We had people from sprinting, people from singing, fashion, music. My good friend Henry Slade up there, he came along and helped, which was great. So that was sort of engaging the at-home audience is something which we've been working with the Jockey Club, and I think coronavirus has really brought forward is brands are realizing that there's all these people at home, and how can we use social media more innovatively. Obviously you guys have probably seen this poster around. This was the case study from last June, from Freshers 2019. So this was the big tour essentially, which we took racing to the students of Britain. So this started off on the south coast and then worked its way all the way across the country. This was I think probably our biggest tour to date, really, and put Invades on the map in terms of who we were as a brand. Now, Invades for change, and this sort of talking about how we're going forward as a brand. How we see, we've got this fantastic network of people really across the country, and we've got this ability to bring people together for, big live sporting events. But I think what we see really is young people in general are really keen to help out and do their bit really to tackle the world's biggest problems. And there's what we see is there's a bit of a gap really between people wanting to do something good and actually having the ability to do something good. So I think what we're looking to do with Invades is how can we bring those same people together that we bring together for races? How can we almost create an opportunity for people beyond just sharing something on their story to make a positive impact? So I think we're going to split that between people and planet. So working with causes such as Surfers Against Sewage, who do beach cleans across the UK. It's really finding those causes and charities who need large volumes of physical volunteers. And then from a people side is how can we potentially help, universities in less convenient locations join Black Lives Matter protests, things like this, or the Race for Life, which is a cancer charity. These events require lots of physical staff, so I think that's something we're looking to do longer term with Invades. And I think from the events side, we're really passionate about sort of Instagrammable experiences, and I think we've now developed such an amazing network of venues, places like Ascot. It's almost how can we create the Elro of live sport is sort of the long-term vision for Invades from an events perspective. And now we've got the network of venues. It's about investing in, more props. It's about investing in these, what you see really like the Elro experience has been very carefully put together. And it sort of sells itself now, because obviously everyone who goes is invariably sharing something on their social media. So it's how can we sort of tap into that world? A little bit on my sort of career to date, really. So I spent a year at Morgan Stanley as part of their exotic derivative trade support team in London. So I think what this taught me was that I definitely don't want to work in finance longer term. I found it quite a controlled, it suppressed my creative nature, I'd say. But I think for what it did teach me was a discipline and attention to detail. And when you're moving large quantities of money around, like we were doing on our desk, and the complexity of the financial products we were creating and working with, the detail really does matter. And that working in that environment and working so closely with the traders, I've definitely taken that into Invades, and it's something which, if you do have the opportunity to go to one of these banks, I definitely would take it at this stage in your career, even if you do have the intention of setting up your own thing, because you will learn a hell of a lot from that. And then even, from your CV perspective, getting those sort of names on your CV is really vital, I think. I wouldn't say it was a waste of time for me, but it also showed me that path wasn't really right. And then I also spent a year at AKQA, which is it's an award-winning creative agency. So they really help big brands use digital in the most innovative way possible. And I think what I learned from those guys was it sort of expanded my imagination, and I think it made me realize how far behind so many industries are when you look at the technology that's available. And yeah, I think I was never going to be there long term, but it really helped me sort of start Invades and ultimately market Invades in a way which appeals really to thousands of people. And then a little bit of advice, like, you know, for me starting a business, I think it has been a really tough journey. And there's definitely some key learning. So yeah, I was very fortunate to really go to, so I went to school with Henry Slade, who's obviously an England rugby player, has had a very successful career. I think what I learned from Henry from a very early age was being completely dedicated to one thing. And he from a very young age made those decisions which meant that which put his rugby first. And I think starting a business is very similar to that. And you really got to prioritize and consider every decision and every bit of time, how you're spending your time. And I mean, Henry at age 14, 15 was saying, well, I'm not going to this party, or I'm not going to go to the pub, or I'm not doing this and that. And I think the same applies with business, because ultimately when you're starting your business, at the very beginning, every second you have is so precious, and you really should be plowing all your time into that. And it does create a very lonely existence to an extent. Like, you know, the top entrepreneurs work incredibly hard. They work very long hours, and they make those decisions which other people won't. So it's, you know, not going to see your mates on this day or whatever, or you've really got to dedicate yourself to your passion. I think, yeah, when we first did the Invades tour, I was, you know, waking up at 5 a.m. I was going to sleep at 1, 2, and you do have to put those hours in. But if you're passionate enough about something, it really doesn't feel like work. And that's sort of, yeah, how it's been ever since, really. Like, doing my own business, I've never felt like I'm working, which has been really cool. And it's very liberating, I'd say. And then picture on the right is a very good friend of mine. It's a guy called Raphael Russo, he creates these amazing Airbnb spaces. He's huge in the student property market in the Midlands. He's sort of managing, I think, around £300 million worth of student property. He owns around £30 million of HMOs in there, in that region. And yeah, I think what Raf taught me was, in starting a business, is really how to make your business as scalable as possible and limiting your downside risk. And I think when you're at university, people are always thinking about the big idea, like, I'm going to change the world with this app. And then they go, oh shit, well, to create this app, I need 100 grand. But I think what he taught me anyway was find something which is super scalable without having to invest massive amounts in technology. And how far can you get without investment? Like, the best entrepreneurs you've ultimately, to gain investment, I think you need to prove your concept and sort of make your mistakes and make all your understand what is your scalable proposition that an investor is going to put money through you in order to achieve. And I think what he taught me really was, finding that scalable formula that you can do really with resources within your own network. So that's something he's particularly good at. So yeah, that's sort of, in terms of the presentation, everything from my end. Did you want to ask some questions? Harrison, was it more conversational now?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got a few questions, so I'm happy just to, fire them out to you.
Yeah.
I think one of my big questions is social media, because obviously over the last few years, I'd say social media has become one of the core elements of a company, like the way it engages with people online. So Invades has been around since 2014. People have been on Instagram, Facebook since 2014. How have you seen this landscape change, and how have you adjusted with it?
I think paid social media has become massive. Like, but it's never been easier to ignore paid social media, in my opinion. And it's so easy to scroll past an advert these days. And I think what we see huge potential in is organic social media, and everything we do is engineered to try and generate as much as that as possible. So yeah, we're huge on brand ambassadors are a big thing for us, and it's almost we look for people who reflect our brand values, who would enjoy our experience, and therefore they're in the best position to sell it. And I think, yeah, I think social media has become massive, but the brands that do it best are the ones who are they're empowering their communities, and they are also turning their communities into billboards. You look at something like Supreme, for example. Everyone who buys it knows when their drop is, and they've almost every single customer is the billboard, and they've invested really heavily into their brand in that sense. I think like the community is everything really on social media. I personally we don't do much paid social media because it's not that effective. Retargeting is, if we're going to do anything, that's probably how we'd use it. But yeah, I do think for our business, ultimately we're selling experiences from newsfeed. So we've got to have good content. So yeah, I'd say we invest heavily into assets. We believe in organic social media, and creating brand ambassador teams is a big part of our strategy, really.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. And then we've got a question from Zara. How did you manage to target your market for Invade? So how did you find a specific market and go after them?
I think because Invades is ultimately a connector brand, it's very easy for us to call out really our customer. So Edinburgh, University of Edinburgh invades the races. University of Edinburgh invades the Highland Games. Our name sort of can sit anywhere. Because we're a connector brand, we can very easily sit between either institutions or physical locations. So yeah, we've been very fortunate in that sense. And then the university sector is they're very easy. It's very easy to define. So like at Pollock Hall, there's 5,000 students there in those, or I don't know, however many. And in all of these university towns, it's the same. And we've just launched in New Zealand, in Auckland, and it's been very easy to launch over there because it's a clearly defined market, and the university structure gives us that. And I think if you're looking to develop a business in the student space, it's not too difficult to find your customer. If Zara's looking to launch, I don't know what if it's a loaded question.
Yeah, it doesn't say, but yeah, no, I think that was a good answer. I think we can also build on that. So you were talking that you've expanded into New Zealand and that you're constantly looking for new sports to evolve with. How are you able to keep your fundamental brand identity pure, to the student market? I mean, obviously you started it as a student, I think in 2018 in Loughborough, right? So you were always going to go after students, and it was always going to be uni sports. But now you're, as you said, the Highland Games, you've gone into New Zealand. How are you going to keep this sort of core value, this core market alive? Or are you just not going to? Is that sort of the sacrifice you make?
So we're passionate about, I think our Harrison?
Hi, yeah, sorry, that was a tech problem on my side.
People didn't want to hear me anymore.
You're good now.
So yeah, how do we sort of remain authentic to who we are? I think our lens is live sport, and what we're trying to do is make live sport interesting, exciting, convenient and affordable. That convenient, affordable, and exciting are essentially our three things. And we always need that element of, we're never going to start doing club nights, or we're not going to start doing, I don't know, tours of castles. Invades is about connecting young people with sport, and that can, I think, longer term, we're looking to move out of the university space, because I think a student events company has got such there's certain connotations with that, and it's like student accommodation. You instantly think, oh, that's going to be overpriced and probably not that good. Like the quality is not going to be there. So I think where we're trying to move to is we're a brand for young people to experience live sport in a completely different way than they usually would, and that's sort of why we want to invest more in things like, you know, the Elro production, but at a live sports venue, because we're then giving customers a totally different experience than just going with a group of mates to the races or group of mates to the football. Like, it's combining live sport with partying. That's really our space. And the work, like, there isn't really a limit to that. Like, we found in New Zealand, we sold 50% of our allocation in 2 hours for Auckland Invades the races. And what we're finding over there is there's less of a strong university culture. In the UK, there's a really strong, it's almost tribal. Like, people like, I'm at Edinburgh, or I'm at Loughborough, and everyone's very proud of where they study. Whereas over there, it's not as strong, and they're more, you know, they've got their group of homemates and they've got their uni mates, and that's far closer knit. I think a lot more people as well live at home as well. So, but in Auckland, we're seeing like young professionals, I shared some stuff on LinkedIn, and this guy messaged me he's a private wealth manager for one of the banks over there, and he was like, "Oh, I want to bring a couple of my young clients along." And I was like, "Oh, this is super cool, because it's the direction we want to head. It's like live sport, but far more fun than if you just go for a sort of normal day out."
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, it's interesting that you focus on the student market, and now you're trying to not necessarily move away from the student market. Of course, they're going to be a large part of your, you know, customer base, but you don't want to necessarily identify as much as be like classified as a student brand. Would you say it is quite important when starting a brand to find a niche such as a student and then grow larger, or do you think it would be better just to go for the larger customer base from the get-go?
No, I think I definitely think find that niche, and what you need is case studies, really. And we found that with the Nottingham event. Once you have that case study, it gives you the ability to scale, because either other customers can get it or other suppliers or other partners get it. But without that first initial test, you're never going to be able to expand it to lots of other things. So yeah, start small, start with a niche, test your model as well. Like, what works, what doesn't work. And along the way, we've had loads of failures and we've had loads of mistakes that we've learned from. But as long as you keep learning and as long as you keep learning and you roll all those learnings into what you do, as long as you're making the same mistake twice, it's fine. But for Invades, sort of why we see it as we now want to go broad, bigger market. When you graduate, you don't go, well, I don't like going to live sport anymore, or I don't like going to the horse racing, and ultimately, actually, the value of that customer is more when people come to London or move to Bristol, Edinburgh in their graduate jobs. You know, there's far higher levels of disposable income. So actually, the customer is more valuable beyond university to an extent, and we don't want to have a brand which means we stop. But you're never. Ultimately, we're not going to be a mass market product, but I definitely agree with the principle of starting small and finding your scalable proposition almost. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. So we got a question in a complete different direction now from Joanna. She said, how do you think high tech would redefine the way people experience live sport in 10 years time? Like the way that we've had social media and VR experience in the past decade that really shaped live sport. So I suppose this question is really trying to ask, you're going to have sport remotely now, like in a pub, you might watch a football match, but now you might have VR goggles and you can pretend you're actually in the stands. How is that going to change sport as we know it, and how is Invades going to adapt with it?
For me, ultimately, I think we're a very long way from replicating the real experience. And I've done quite a few VR things, and the technology simply isn't there. I think the at home, I think it's made brands and sporting organizations realize that actually there is this huge at-home audience that we need to engage, and actually we're missing an opportunity. So people like the Cheltenham Festival, you're only getting, I don't know, they see probably 200,000 people through the week, but globally around the world, they're seeing, I don't know, millions and millions of people watch the Cheltenham Festival. But as a brand, Cheltenham aren't owning that experience at the minute. They're only looking after those people on courses. For us, I see it as an opportunity, really, because I think we're going to be able to use the technology quicker and more innovatively than those partners, just knowing those businesses. So I think, yeah, we see it as an opportunity. And the other thing is, because Invades is constantly, because we're sort of dealing, our primary customer is students and young people who are the earliest adopters of technology. I think we have to adapt in order to stay relevant to our customers. So therefore, we can almost pass our learnings on to our suppliers almost. So yeah, but longer term, I think we're of the opinion that it's very hard to replicate that on-course experience. And I think in the short term, we're going to be almost that on-course experience needs to become better. And I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree as well. I think it'd be very tricky to replicate this sort of live experience. I mean, of course, you can go to the pub with your mates and watch a football game, but that's going to be completely different than, watching like the Premier League final in like the big stadium is not even the same thing. But yeah, so it's interesting to hear you talk about different sports such as racing and make that comparison there. Okay, just conscious of time, we've just gone past 1:30. So I'm going to hit it with one more question leaning towards corporate social responsibility, because obviously this is a big thing at the moment, rightfully so. And people are just exploring different ways that they can be more responsible with their companies. So you mentioned that, what was it? Can you remind me what it's called? Was it called Change or?
Invades Change. And I think it's sort of come from, sorry, you ask the question, Harrison.
No, that's fine. I'll hear like what you're saying in a little bit. But so Invades Change, right? They've done a fair bit for the NHS. I've seen that. I saw it on LinkedIn. I thought it was really, really cool. And I've seen that you've picked 4 charities to work with. What's sort of the process for the selection? And is it people working in the company are like, okay, this is something I really identify with, I want to work towards these? Or is it slightly more democratic in the way that people who go to Invades events would be like, this is what I want to see? How does it work?
So, and yeah, this is very much in the infancy at the minute. And those charities we've identified are that we haven't got official partnerships in place with them yet. But what we're looking for is organizations and causes which require large volumes of manpower, essentially. And I think people, as you rightly identify, young people want to do their bit to help make the world a better place. But beyond sharing something on Facebook or sharing something on Instagram, like what practical ways can I help the causes that I care about? And for me, like RAG at universities, or RAG, I don't know if they have that at Edinburgh.
Yeah, they do a Race to Paris first semester. So
yeah. So that RAG at all these student unions does happen, but I don't know. Student unions invariably sometimes struggle to connect with all students, I think, and in some universities aren't considered particularly cool organizations. And I think it comes from a place where, can we enable our customer and almost encourage our community to, if they are passionate about these certain things and these certain topics, like, can they do something practically to help those things? So like, the Beach Clean, for example, Surfers Against Sewage is a huge charity which operates across the UK. near to all universities, and they're doing these amazing like beach cleanups, but what they need is people to do them. And like, we're really good at using social media to create large groups of people. So can we bring those groups of people who are passionate, say, about the environment, who don't want to see loads of litter all over our beaches and the effects it has on wildlife? Like, can we support those charities? So I think what we're looking to do over the next few months is get those relationships in place with charities and organizations and causes that need manpower, essentially. And it's difficult to, it's not easy finding the right partners, because we would only ever want to deal with charities with, who are completely transparent, and we know where all the money's going. We know, if we're bringing 50 people and they're giving them all this time, like, is that going to be used effectively? It's just identifying those charities who we are completely confident that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's really important to identify charities that you share values. For example, so we've got REACH, which is the Edinburgh Entrepreneurs Society's charity initiative. So when we were going through, we released a survey to all our members on Facebook, and we started going through what people were interested in. And of course, that's fine. It's nice to know what's sort of relevant at the time. But as you're saying, it's difficult to know how you're actually helping. I think that's a value-driven thing, and you need to be really conscious of who you're helping and why you're helping them. So yeah, I think that's cool. And then last question, we are going to wrap it up here. It goes without saying, coronavirus has massively affected the sporting industry, and I suppose hospitality, if you could consider Invades on that. How have you adapted, and going forward, like, what are you going to do to get people to feel confident enough to come back to your events?
So how have we adapted? I think we've developed, obviously, the Invades sort of agency arm, which is focused on how can we use social media to engage with a younger audience, really. And that's for our suppliers. So people like the Jockey Club, people like Ascot, people like Arena Racing. Developed the agency model. We've looked at other territories. So we've launched in New Zealand with the Auckland Racing Club. We had a call last week with Thoroughbred Racing New Zealand, so working across lots of different courses in New Zealand from probably 2021. And then horse racing Australia is massive, and we had a pitch last week to Brisbane Racing Club. So I think, we're using this time really to expand internationally, but also onboard and build a really strong sales team in the UK. So we've been developing closer relationships with universities. It's sort of like we're having this grace period to really get the infrastructure in place for when the lights do come back on, and just making sure we're using this time as productively as possible. In terms of people feeling safe at the event, so we've just signed a deal with National Express, who are going to be our travel provider, and obviously they're the UK's biggest transport operator, and work very closely with the government in terms of all the COVID restrictions, because they're running a lot of public services. And then race courses, fortunately, have got very large capacities. So all of our events for the first term are going to be socially distant. And I think because we've got access to these venues with such large capacity, and we see that there isn't going to be much in the way of events in the first term at university, I think it could actually be a very good period for us, just because there's going to be far less competition. And we are able to put on large scale events with full social distancing and that are safe, which, nightclubs won't be opening. I think it's going to be a very weird freshers. I feel very sorry for all those people having probably the worst freshers in modern history.
Online freshers fair, yeah.
Yeah, Zoom fresher, but it's not. Hope, and our events are really from late October through to early December, is when we're planning at the minute.
Okay, fingers crossed we see a little bit of change in terms of policy there. But actually, that's a really positive note to end on. The fact that you are able to find opportunity in what could otherwise seem a quite uncertain time. So that's quite a nice message to, all the entrepreneurs watching this.
Yes, it's not all over.
Exactly.
I actually feel like I've probably got coronavirus, but
oh gosh. Hopefully nothing too bad will come of that.
No, it just hit me today. I don't think I just feel terrible, but I thought we'd soldier on and do this. So,
and you're here. Thank you. On behalf of the society, thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you on, and I feel like I learned a lot. So I hope everyone watching also learned a lot. So once again, thank you, Dom.
Cheers, Saracen. Bye.
Bye.